Pay attention to this. February 18, 2025, 6:12 in the morning, Brooklyn, New York. What you are about to hear was captured in just 14 seconds of security footage. 14 seconds that, at first glance, looked like a random act of violence. 14 seconds that investigators initially categorized as a street assault with no clear motive. But within days, those same 14 seconds would uncover a history that stretched back more than 3 decades. A history that one person had never forgotten. The camera angle was fixed above the entrance of a small convenience store on a quiet residential street. The sky was still dark. Streetlights flickered against damp pavement from overnight rain. There were no pedestrians nearby, no traffic, just silence and the faint hum of early morning city life beginning to wake. At 6:12 a.m., the store door opened. A woman stepped outside. She moved slowly, carefully, holding a small paper bag against her chest. She appeared to be in her late 60s. Her posture suggested fatigue, or perhaps the stiffness that comes with age. She paused near the door, adjusting her coat, unaware of anyone around her. The footage showed nothing unusual, nothing threatening. Just an ordinary morning routine. 3 seconds later, another figure emerged from the same doorway. A man, younger, taller, his face partially visible beneath the store's overhead light. He did not look at the cashier behind him. He did not check his phone. He did not hesitate. He stepped forward with purpose, closing the distance between himself and the woman in 2 quick strides. What happened next lasted less than 2 seconds. The man raised his arm and struck the woman on the side of her head with force. There was no exchange of words, no struggle, no warning. The impact caused her to collapse instantly onto the pavement. The paper bag slipped from her hands, spilling its contents across the ground. The man did not reach for her purse. He did not kneel to check her condition. He did not run. He simply turned and walked away. No theft, no shouting, no visible panic, just a single, deliberate strike and then calm departure. At 6:13 a.m., the street was empty again. The woman remained motionless for nearly 40 seconds before a passing driver noticed her and stopped. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes. She was transported to a nearby hospital in critical condition, unconscious and unresponsive. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore. She was 68 years old, a retired public librarian who had lived in Brooklyn for over 40 years. Friends later described her as routine, oriented, and quiet. She volunteered twice a week at a community reading program for children. She had no criminal history, no known conflicts, and no social media presence. She lived alone in a small apartment 6 blocks from the store where the attack occurred. According to neighbors, she walked the same route every Tuesday and Thursday morning to buy coffee and a newspaper. It was a habit she had followed for nearly a decade. There was nothing in her background that suggested danger, nothing that indicated she had enemies, nothing that explained why someone would approach her without warning and strike her with such precision. Within hours, the security footage circulated among local law enforcement units. The attacker's face, though partially shadowed, was clear enough for identification software to generate a match. By late afternoon, police had a name. Adrian Cole, 32 years old, resided approximately 2 miles from the crime scene. Cole had a limited criminal record, minor infractions, a disorderly conduct citation from several years earlier, nothing violent. No history of assault. No documented connection to Eleanor Whitmore. No shared workplace, no shared neighborhood associations, no known interactions. Officers arrived at his apartment at 7:40 p.m. the same evening. He answered the door almost immediately. According to the arrest report, Adrian Cole appeared calm. He did not attempt to flee. He did not ask questions. He did not deny involvement. He allowed officers to place him in handcuffs without resistance. During transport to the precinct, he remained silent, staring forward, offering no explanation. The silence continued in the interrogation room. Detectives showed him the footage. They explained the victim's condition. They asked why he had attacked her. They asked whether he knew her. They asked whether this had been a robbery attempt or a misunderstanding. Adrian Cole responded to none of it. He sat still, his hands folded, eyes fixed on the table. Nearly 40 minutes into questioning, he finally spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not look at the detectives. He said only one sentence. "She knows what she did." Then he fell silent again. There was no elaboration, no confession, no denial, just that single statement repeated once more when asked to clarify. After that, he refused to answer further questions and requested legal counsel. Investigators reviewed the footage again. They slowed it down frame by frame. They examined body language, angles, shadows. The strike was deliberate, targeted, not the behavior of someone attempting theft or acting in panic. There was intent, but intent without visible motive. Background checks began immediately. On paper, their lives had never crossed. Different neighborhoods, different professions, different generations, no shared institutions, no mutual acquaintances. Nothing in recent records suggested any reason for Adrian Cole to even recognize Eleanor Whitmore, let alone attack her in public daylight. Yet his statement suggested familiarity, recognition, a history that official databases did not reveal. At the hospital, Eleanor Whitmore remained unconscious. Doctors reported severe head trauma. Her condition was described as unstable. Family members were notified. Detectives waited for the possibility of a statement, but none came. She never regained consciousness that night. Back at the precinct, investigators expanded their search parameters. Employment histories, archived public records, old addresses, civil cases, school registries, anything that could connect the two names beyond recent years. The assumption was simple: if the motive was not present in the present, it might exist in the past. By midnight, the case had shifted from random assault to targeted attack. The footage had provided the action. Adrian Cole's sentence had provided the question. But the answer remained buried somewhere beyond immediate view, hidden behind ears that no one had yet examined. And for the moment, all anyone knew was this: a woman lay in critical condition, a man sat in custody without remorse, and 14 seconds of footage had opened a mystery that refused to explain itself. When investigators cannot find a motive in the present, they begin searching the past. The initial background checks on Adrian Cole and Eleanor Whitmore had revealed nothing unusual. No shared addresses, no overlapping employment, no social connections. On paper, they were strangers separated by more than 3 decades of age and entirely different social circles. But Adrian Cole's statement, "She knows what she did," suggested recognition, not confusion, not impulse, recognition. Detectives expanded the timeline. Instead of searching 5 or 10 years back, they extended the review to 30. Employment records were requested. Archived municipal files were pulled from storage. Old digital databases were cross-referenced with paper documents that had not been opened in decades. It was a slow process. Many of the records predated modern digitization. Some existed only in physical folders stacked in city archives. 2 days later, a connection appeared. In 1993, Eleanor Whitmore had worked not as a librarian, but as an administrative case coordinator for the Brooklyn Family Services Department, a temporary position she held for just under 3 years before returning to library work. The role involved processing intake reports, scheduling family hearings, and documenting case summaries prepared by social workers. It was not a field position. She did not conduct investigations, but her signature appeared on dozens of official documents authorizing procedural steps. One of those documents contained a familiar surname, Cole. Further review revealed the full file, a case opened in late 1994, a 6-year-old child named Adrian Cole. The discovery did not immediately explain the attack, but it shifted the investigation's direction. Detectives requested the complete archival folder. What they found was not a criminal record, but a family history marked by instability, poverty, and repeated intervention from social agencies. In 1994, Adrian Cole had been living with his mother in a small apartment in eastern Brooklyn. Reports from neighbors described frequent absences, extended periods where the child appeared unsupervised, and signs of neglect linked more to financial hardship than deliberate harm. The apartment building itself had multiple code violations: heating failures, plumbing issues, limited utilities during winter months. Family Services opened a case to evaluate the environment. Eleanor Whitmore's role, according to documentation, was administrative but critical. She processed the internal approvals that moved the case from observation to temporary removal. Her signature appeared on the authorization that allowed Adrian Cole to be placed into short-term foster care while his mother attended mandated support programs. The records showed the decision had been described as protective, not punitive, temporary, reviewable within 6 months. But temporary decisions do not always remain temporary. Adrian's mother struggled to meet program requirements. Transportation issues, inconsistent employment, and lack of childcare made attendance irregular. Deadlines were missed. Extensions were denied. The 6-month placement extended to a year, then 2. Eventually, the temporary order transitioned into long-term foster care. There was no single dramatic moment, no courtroom confrontation, just paperwork, delays, and procedural outcomes accumulating over time. Adrienne Cole moved through 4 different foster homes between the ages of 6 and 14. Case notes referenced adjustment difficulties, school transfers, and behavioral counseling. None of the entries described violence. Most described withdrawal, quietness, difficulty forming attachments. At 16, he requested access to his case file, a right granted under state policy. That was the first time he saw Eleanor Whitmore's name. To him, the signature represented authority, finality. The moment his life shifted direction. To the department, it was one administrative approval among hundreds processed that year. To Adrienne, it was personal, identifiable, permanent. Years passed. He aged out of the foster system at 18. Employment records showed temporary jobs, warehouse shifts, delivery driving. Nothing stable. No major criminal activity. Just a pattern of short-term work and frequent address changes. Friends later described him as reserved but polite, someone who rarely discussed childhood but reacted strongly to conversations about family separation or institutional care. The file might have remained a memory, if not for what happened in late 2024. After his mother's death that autumn, Adrienne sorted through a small box of preserved documents she had kept for years, letters, program certificates, court notices she never discarded. Among them were photocopies of the original family services paperwork. Eleanor Whitmore's signature appeared repeatedly. Clear, legible, official. For the first time in decades, the name returned to his attention with context attached, dates, decisions, consequences. According to digital search histories later recovered from his phone, Adrienne spent several weeks researching former department employees. Most names led nowhere. Retirements, relocations, inactive records. Eleanor Whitmore's name produced an address, public library volunteer listings, community newsletters, a photograph from a local reading event, a schedule mentioning Tuesday and Thursday morning appearances. Routine became visible, predictable. Investigators reconstructed the timeline through device data and surveillance footage from nearby streets. Adrienne had visited the neighborhood twice in the month before the attack. He had not approached her. He had simply observed, walked the same sidewalks, entered the same store once without interaction, left. The act was not impulsive. It was measured, quietly prepared. During a second interrogation session, conducted after Eleanor Whitmore succumbed to her injuries, Adrienne Cole provided a full explanation. His tone remained calm. His words were direct. He did not dispute the footage or deny intent. She signed the papers, he said. Everyone else moved on. She didn't have to think about it again. I did. Detectives reminded him that administrative staff followed procedure, that multiple approvals were involved, that no single signature determined an outcome. Adrienne acknowledged this without argument, but acknowledgement did not soften his position. To you it was paperwork, he continued. To me it was my childhood. There was no raised voice, no visible anger, just certainty. The revelation reframed the case, not a robbery, not random violence, a collision between a past decision and a present memory. For Eleanor Whitmore, the years between 1996 and 2025 had been filled with ordinary routines, library shifts, volunteer programs, quiet retirement. For Adrienne Cole, the same years had been shaped by transitions he associated with one administrative moment frozen in ink. 2 lives moving in separate directions, intersecting once on paper, and again, decades later, on a sidewalk beneath a security camera. By the end of the week, prosecutors had enough evidence to establish premeditation search histories, location data, repeated visits, and his own recorded statements. The mystery of motive was no longer hidden. It had simply been buried under years no one initially thought to examine. What began as 14 seconds of unexplained violence had unfolded into a history measured not in minutes, but in decades, a reminder that some decisions conclude on paper, while their consequences continue quietly in the minds of those who never stopped remembering. Prosecutors formally charged Adrienne Cole with second-degree murder. The trial began in October 2025. The courtroom was quiet, restrained, and procedural, a sharp contrast to the emotional history that had led everyone there. The prosecution's case relied heavily on digital evidence and surveillance footage. Search histories showed weeks of research. Location data confirmed repeated visits to the neighborhood. The 14 seconds of CCTV footage were played multiple times, slowed frame by frame, each viewing reinforcing the same conclusion. The act had been deliberate, The defense did not deny that Adrian Cole had struck Eleanor Whitmore. Instead, they focused on context. They presented archived records from the 1994 Family Services case. They described the instability of his childhood, the foster placements, the long-term psychological impact of institutional separation. Their argument was not that the act was justified, but that it was rooted in decades of unresolved trauma rather than sudden malice. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Their verdict reflected the complexity of the narrative. Adrian Cole was found guilty of second-degree murder, with acknowledgement of extreme emotional disturbance influencing motive. He was sentenced to 30 years to life in state prison. During sentencing, Eleanor Whitmore's younger sister addressed the court. Her voice remained steady as she described a woman who had lived quietly, who volunteered her time teaching children to read, who rarely spoke about her early administrative work because she considered it a brief chapter of her life, not a defining one. She reminded the courtroom that Eleanor Whitmore had never met Adrian Cole as an adult, never knew he carried resentment tied to a signature written decades earlier. She believed paperwork was just paperwork, her sister said. She never imagined it could follow her into the future. Adrian Cole was also given an opportunity to speak. His statement was brief. He did not apologize, but he did not celebrate the act either. He spoke of childhood records, of growing up with files instead of photographs, of believing that one administrative decision had determined the course of his life. His words were calm, almost clinical, as if describing events that had already solidified beyond change. Outside the courtroom, the case sparked debate. Some argued that institutions often underestimate the long-term psychological impact of family separation. Others emphasized that administrative workers operate within systems shaped by policies, not personal judgment. Experts noted that hindsight reshapes every decision, turning procedural actions into moral questions years later. Eleanor Whitmore was buried in a private ceremony attended by close family and former colleagues. The library where she had volunteered dedicated a small reading corner in her name. Adrian Cole entered the correctional system carrying the same documents he once believed had defined his childhood, now joined by a new file documenting the consequences of his response to them. 14 seconds of footage had revealed a moment of violence. 30 years of records had revealed its origin. A signature written in routine had become, in one man's memory, a life-altering event. A strike delivered in seconds had ended a life that had long since moved beyond that moment. 2 timelines, separated by decades, had collided beneath a security camera that recorded only the ending, never the years that led to it. Some decisions echo quietly. Some memories never fade, and sometimes the past does not return as nostalgia or regret, but as accountability shaped by perception rather than intention. Subscribe for true crime stories that explore the hidden motivations behind real events. Watch the suggested videos to discover more cases where the past refused to stay buried.